Good afternoon, Chicago. Jimmy Cosenza here. Before I head out for the day, I got a great story we're going to do tonight. This is about some of the men that were literally chased out of Chicago. Some of them got sick and tired of paying their dues to the Chicago outfit. Some of them couldn't handle the verbal and the physical abuse. A lot of them were scared to go to jail. So they decided to flip, cooperate, snitch, rat, whatever you want to call it, and help the feds, help the cops send these guys to jail. And some of them got life sentences. So we're going to talk about just some of the guys that are no longer welcome in the city of Chicago. Now we'll start with this guy. This guy's a real piece of work. Louis Bomp and Zeno. Bomp, high-ranking associate of the Chicago outfit. Close with Fifi, Joe Nagel, Donald Angelini, the Wizard, and Jack Cerrone. This guy was a bookie, burglar, thief, associate of the Elmwood Park crew. He got pinched, and when he was doing time in prison, the FBI came to visit him. He wanted out of jail. They let him out of jail early, and he started cooperating once he got back on the street. He was passing very sensitive, important information about the outfit to the FBI. They eventually found out he was laying low in Arizona, I think Tempe, Arizona. One day he went to start the car, and kaboom. There was a car bomb planted that blew up him and his car to smithereens. If you guys know anything else about this guy, this informant, this outfit associate who decided to flip, cooperated, and was murdered, enter in your comments. Next, we got James Lavelli. I actually seen this guy at two different trials. The first trial I ever went to was the Gus Alex Trial. He was Lenny Patrick's captain, if you will, in their extortion crew. James Lavelli, Nick Gio, Mario Renone, and others were going into car dealerships, restaurant owners in the northwest suburbs, demanding hundreds of thousands of dollars and threatening violence. They eventually all got convicted. Rather than do some time in prison, he decided to flip, cooperate against Gus Alex, Mario Renone, Nick Gio, and his boss, Lenny Patrick. He also testified a couple years later at the Sam Carlisi trial. His testimony helped convict Sam Carlisi, boss of Chicago outfit, Jimmy Marcello, Tony Zizzo, the Bonavolante brothers, and Anthony the Hatch, and a couple other associates. I thought for sure Anthony the Hatch Tirmani was going to jump over the table and attack this guy when he was on the stand. This guy was a tough son of a bitch for the Chicago outfit. Kind of looked like an NFL running back. Several years later, he was killed by the Chicago outfit, one of over 1,000 unsolved murders. James Lavelli, just like Bomp, once they agreed to cooperate, their days in Chicago were over. Now here we got a guy, Red Wemette. Red Wemette, as we all know, had a couple porn shops in Chicago. And the Chicago outfit for years was extorting money from Red. He had to pay them monthly payments. After years of verbal and physical abuse, he got sick and tired of some of these outfit guys. He decided not only to flip and cooperate, but actually wire up his apartment. And when outfit guys would come visit him to hang out and drink and bullshit, they had no idea, men like Frankie Schweihs and others, that were being recorded by the FBI in Red Wemette. He was kind of acting like a double agent, like he was part of the FBI because he was working with them. And then in his personal business life, he would tell anybody that would listen that he was a close associate of the Chicago mob, specifically the Grand Avenue crew. But he wrote a book, Nobody Cares, and this is what I did about it. I never read the book. But this guy here definitely got chased out of Chicago and has never been back since. This is Red Wemette, one of several informants. He testified at the Family Secrets trial early on. I missed his testimony, but he claims he was real good friends with Tony Spilotro, Joe Lombardo, Jimmy Cozzo. But you never see one photo of Red with any of these guys. No weddings. He claims he used to get invited to mobsters' weddings. He also claims that Frankie Schweihs told him in great detail how the Spilotro brothers were killed. But according to Nick Calabrese, who was there, who was one of the killers, he never once mentioned that Frank Schweihs was there. He also testified that he tells in one of his podcasts that after having several drinks with Tony Spilotro, that he admitted to Tony Spilotro that he was a snitch, that he was an informant, and Tony Spilotro's reaction was nothing. He said or did absolutely nothing. Complete bullshit. But this is Red Wemette, one of probably 100 guys that are never welcome back in the city of Chicago. And then we'll keep going. Frank Collada, associate of the Chicago outfit, burglar, thief. He even did some heavy work. As we know, good friend with Tony Spilotro, moved out west. They started the Hole in the Wall gang, and we all know how these guys fucked everything up. Rather than do more time in prison when he got pinched in the Bertha burglary store they were about to rob, he decided to flip and cooperated. He tells everybody once he heard the recording of Joe Lombardo and Tony Spilotro talking in code about cleaning up your own garbage, he took that as they were going to kill him, which they probably were, because a lot of guys were getting killed. We talked about the straw man case that pretty much destroyed what was left of the mob's influence in Vegas. But Frankie Collada, he tells a lot of really interesting stories. Some of it is embellished. But he was a guy that had to leave Chicago for obvious reasons. He was chased out. His brother still lives in Chicago. But Frankie Collada, one of several guys that is no longer welcome in the city. We'll keep going. Here's a corrupt police chief of Willow Springs, Michael Corbett. He was an associate of the Chicago outfit. Guys like Sal Bastone, Hy Lermer, Sam Giancana. Giancana gave him the job and told him, don't ever forget who your friends were. Joe Lombardo never liked this guy, never trusted him. Sure enough, when Corbett decided to flip and cooperate, over his involvement in the Diane Masters killing. Joe Lombardo put out a contract. I think it was Scarpelli or Scalise. I always confuse those two, to kill him. But unfortunately, the government snatched him up before the guys got a chance to get to him. But he came very close to getting killed for eventually cooperating. Same thing like all the guys we're talking about. The day he decided to cooperate, he never showed his face in Chicago again. I actually knew this lowlife because I used to hang out in Willow Springs, and he was notorious for pulling over people and harassing people. So when I found out that he got indicted for the Diane Masters killing, me and probably 200 other people that hung out in the southwest suburbs were so happy that day. A real lowlife piece of shit here. Speaking of lowlifes, the biggest lowlife, I'd rather drink and smoke with O.J. Simpson, Saddam Hussein, and Osama bin Laden than this lowlife. Old Jewish gangster, goes back to the Al Capone days. Lenny Patrick, he was kind of like their gambling lieutenant for the North Shore. He decided he didn't want to die in jail, poor guy, so he decided to flip and wear a wire against Gus Alex. He was giving Gus Alex thousands of dollars a month from an extortion crew that he was the head of. As I mentioned before, Lenny Patrick led a crew of James Lavelli, Mario Renone, Nick Gio, and others, and they were extorting local businessmen. What was interesting, Lenny Patrick and Gus Alex would use their doctors at Northwestern Memorial Hospital to send messages. The doctors actually testified in court. But again, Lenny Patrick, the day he decided to flip, he was no longer welcome in Chicago, one of 100 lowlifes that were chased out of the city. We'll keep going here. Corrupt cop, crooked lawyer, bagman, mob cop, connected defense attorney. This guy, Bob Cooley, he wore a wire and brought down the entire First Ward. John DiArco, Pat Marcy, Alderman Rhodey. These men had more power than the President of the United States. I'm kidding, but that's how powerful the First Ward was. They controlled everything in the city. And when the Chicago outfit lost the First Ward, thanks to this piece of shit, it pretty much devastated the Chicago outfit. But this is Bob Cooley. He's no longer welcome in Chicago. He was chased out years ago by cooperating and wearing a wire against Pat Marcy, Alderman Fred Rhodey. He even had the balls to wire up and try to get some of the Taylor Street guys caught on tape, but they never trusted him. And Harry Allen, he testified and helped convict Harry Allman as well. But this is Bob Cooley, one of many guys that got chased out of Chicago and will never, ever come back. We'll keep going. Probably the worst of the worst, right next to Lenny Patrick, you got Blowjob BJ Jahoda. He was a lieutenant in the gambling operations of Rocky and Felice's crew. Rather than do a couple of years in prison, he decided to flip and cooperate against Rocky's entire crew. That was Rocky and Felice, Sally De Laurentiis, Louis Marino, Bobby Bellavia, and Robert Salerno. I went to both of those trials. I seen him testify in court. He actually wore a wire trying to get some of the guys to talk about the murder of Hal Smith, but they were way too smart to mention it. But he actually lured his best friend, Hal Smith, to his house after several drinks. When he walked in the house, according to his testimony, Rocky's crew jumped him, tortured him, and killed him. But he testified against Rocky's crew. He testified against Bobby Salerno. I definitely did not find him credible. He was just he actually made millions of dollars with these guys too. But he set up 2 of his friends, cooperated, and sent Rocky's entire crew to prison. Definitely chased out of Chicago, has never stepped 1 foot back in the city since he cooperated. And then we got this bitch here, Betty Tocco. She was Al Tocco's wife. Al Tocco, as we all know, was the Chicago Heights boss, a very vicious guy. One of the guys that participated in the brutal beatdown of Michael and Tony Spilotro. Al Tocco was also part of the botch burial crew. This lady testified that he verbally and physically abused her for years, even though she lived a pretty good life. She testified that back in the mid-'80s, she got a call late at night. It was her husband. He was yelling, he was swearing, he was screaming for her. He wanted her to pick him up somewhere in Indiana. Now, this is before GPSs and cell phones. This woman drove all the way out to Enos, Indiana, which is probably a good, maybe a 2 and a half, 2-hour drive from downtown, from the city of Chicago. And she said when she picked him up, he was dressed in work clothes. He was full of mud. He was out of breath. And he was livid that the guys he was with, that they lost communication. Everybody kind of took off. It was quite obvious to her. She mentioned that he admitted taking part in the botched burial, but she actually testified against her own husband in court, saying that her husband, she picked up her husband, Al Tocco, after him and the crew buried the Spilotro brothers. Her testimony was crucial in convicting a heavyweight like Al Tocco. Once this woman testified, her family went into the WITSEC program, never to be seen again. A woman that was chased out of Chicago. Here we got Junior. We all know about this guy. He actually sent a letter to the FBI offering to cooperate against his own father. Not only that, Junior Calabrese wore a wire on his father and tricked him, got him to talk about murders that happened years ago. He actually testified against his own father in court, along with his uncle Nick. These 2 guys, him and his uncle, crippled what was left of the Chicago outfit, sent men like Jimmy Marcello, Joe Lombardo, Anthony Chuan, Paulie Charlotte to prison for life. But this is Junior Calabrese. He's definitely not welcome in Chicago, although he claims he still comes in and out every now and then. He does these ridiculous mob tours where he's charging people. He's trying to sell books. He's going on every podcast being interviewed that he can. He's looking for a movie deal. The main reason he testified against his father is, as Frank was right, he not only stole all his money, his property, but he locked up his father for life so he could be free. So now nobody can control him anymore. Now he's looking for to make a buck any way he possibly can. But this is Junior Calabrese. Definitely not welcome in the neighborhoods or the city of Chicago anymore. Chased out to Arizona. And a lot of Chicagoans, retire, relocate in Arizona. Some of them are sleepers out in Arizona, guys like Paulie Shiro that do work. Or you got guys that go into the WITSEC program, like, cooperators like Sammy the Bull. But here's Junior Calabrese. He's definitely not welcome in the city of Chicago anymore. Same with his uncle Nick. This guy passed away. I heard he was seen walking around after he cooperated, but I highly believe that. But Nick Calabrese, he was a made member of the Chicago outfit, participating in 14 murders, testified against Jimmy Marcello, testified against his own brother. It was his testimony that crippled what was left of the Chicago outfit. I'll never, ever forget seeing him on the stand. For the most part, I found him credible because he had so much detail, going back to the 1970s, throughout the 80s, throughout the 90s. I'll never forget it. But this is Nick Calabrese. Once he decided to flip and cooperate in the mid 2000s, he was definitely shelved from the Chicago outfit and shelved from the city of Chicago. Now here's Bobby the Beak Siegel. He's actually a relative of the legendary Bugsy Siegel. This guy has a big nose, Jewish gangster, Chicago outfit associate, did some time in prison, got pinched again, did not want to die in prison, so he decided to flip and cooperate. He actually testified at the family secrets trial, and he was the one that on a burglar they were going to do with Frank Calabrese. There was a dog there, and he did not want to go into the house and have to kill the dog, so he told Frank Calabrese, "I don't do dogs." The whole courtroom laughed. During the Tony Accardo break-ins, he testified at the family secrets trial that a lot of his friends, fellow burglars, went missing. And one day he got a call from John No-Nose DeFranzo asking if he could meet No-Nose, and he knew right there they were trying to set him up. He actually, through his lawyer, took a lie detector's test to prove that he had nothing to do with the Tony Accardo break-in. And believe it or not, the outfit bosses gave him a pass. They did not kill him. They took the lie detector test as credible, and they gave him a pass. So what does this fucking lowlife do? Years later, he flips and cooperates against them. So lucky to be alive, but this guy here chased out of Chicago years ago and is definitely never welcome back. Same thing with this piece of shit here. He testified against Paulie C. and actually wore a wire. I mean, it's one thing to testify or dry snitch, but to wear a wire and totally entrap a friend of yours or a business guy you dealt with is the worst of the worst. Definitely chased out of Chicago, is never welcome back. A real piece of shit. Same here. I seen this lowlife here, Mark K. He was part of the Mark Polchan, Sarno burglary crew, career criminal, career thief, drug dealer, drug user. He actually wore a wire. He got Samuel Volpendenzo on tape talking about the bomb that he made that the crew used to blow up a competitive poker guy. He actually told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that Mike Sarno was the boss of the crew, and his testimony, I didn't find him credible at all. He was definitely trying to use that as a get out of jail free card. He actually, during one home invasion, it was during the day, him and the other guy, they actually got caught. A senior citizen was coming home from Walmart. They actually caught the burglars in act. This fucking lowlife here got in a fight with the old man. The old man was getting the best of him. The old man was actually whooping his ass. In order to break free, this piece of shit, the government's witness, stabbed the old man in the leg. When the jury, the people in the gallows, the jurors, everyone in that courtroom, when they heard that, we were all appalled and disgusted by this guy. Not only was the old man whooping his ass, the guy was probably 30 years older than him, but he actually stabbed him in the leg to break free. Luckily, the old man survived, but the old man's widow, the wife, testified on what happened that day. But this is who these are the kind of people the government bring on to go after their targets. But how could you believe and take this guy seriously? But somehow the jurors found him credible. But this is Marquet, a real piece of shit. He'll definitely never show his face again in the city of Chicago. Same trial. We'll call this guy VD. I hate to even bring up his name. I mean, but just look at him. You can tell he's a fucking lowlife. He had a video poker business that competed a little bit with Mike Sarno. He was warned many times to get his machines out of several bars and restaurants on the southwest side. He refused. He wasn't backing down. Large even sent Mark Polchan, another high-ranking outlaw motorcycle guy. The guy was like 300 pounds, very mean, intimidating. They went into one of his places and smashed it up, biker style. That still didn't scare him. Fast forward, he had a face-to-face confrontation with Large. They were going back and forth, talking shit to one each other. He totally disrespected Large. That was it. According to the government, Mike Sarno, Mark Polkman, and the crew put together a bomb, and they blew up his place to smithereens. I seen this guy testify in court, but that Mike Sarno trial was one of the best trials I've ever went to, because it showed the Chicago Outfit's connection to the outlaw motorcycle gang. But this guy here is definitely not welcome in Chicago. I hope he's laying low, hiding in a cave somewhere. Another defendant, cooperator, government informant, rat snitch, whatever you want to call him, James Formato. This guy was an associate of the Chicago Outfit and a corrupt Berwyn cop. Rather than blow trial and stand up, he testified against Mike Sarno and Sarno's crew. He told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that Sarno was the boss. He talked about their elaborate residential commercial burglary they had going. What him and another Cicero cop were doing is sometimes when they would go on a call, they were actually casing the inside of the home. So if they noticed jewelry, artwork, cash, or anything of value, this scumbag here would tip off the crew. The crew would then break into the home, do the score, fleece the stolen goods through Goldberg Jewelers, which was their front on Roosevelt and Cicero, and then give the crooked cops a little commission. This guy also testified that his father was an old mobbed up associate, and 4 times a year he would drive down to Florida and hand off hundreds of thousands of dollars to his father from drug money and money from the burglaries that they were doing. But this guy here got chased out of Chicago in the mid-2000s, and a real lowlife. Speaking of lowlifes, I mean, I can go on and on. I don't know how much time you got, but we're going to wrap it up soon. This guy here, Jeff Hollingshead, he was a part of the PK crew, somewhat of a Chicago Outfit associate. I've never met him, though, thank God. But he used to hang out a lot of the same places that I hang out today. But him and his girlfriend got in a little trouble. And rather than do any time in jail, they decided to flip and cooperate against Bobby Pinozzo's crew. These guys had a sophisticated burglary crew. They were robbing cops, judges, people from a high-end health club, the East Bank Social Club, businessmen, restaurant owners, and you name it. I mean, these guys were very brass. They would dress up as policemen and raid gangbanger, drug dealer stash houses, steal them cash, guns, drugs. But imagine how dangerous that is. But he was part of that crew, and he decided to flip and cooperate, and he tipped off the feds on an upcoming score that the crew had when Bobby P., a guy I know who's in jail right now, and Paulie K., another guy I know who's released from prison, when they went in to rob the stash house, posed as policemen, posed as detectives, when they came out, they were surrounded by FBI agents, and they got pinched. Not only did they get pinched for running a burglary crew, but they got pinched for running a prostitution ring right in the neighborhood. They got pinched for drug trafficking. They also got pinched for an arson, where they actually torched one of Bobby P's bar, this little restaurant called the Couch, great little place there on Grand and Western. I remember seeing Bobby there when he used to work there. There's a lot of C notes there. He used to hang out there as well. But they had the best coconut shrimp in the city. And then one day I go by and the place is level. But this guy here is definitely got chased out of Chicago, chased out of the neighborhood, and hopefully we'll never see him again. Same with his rat girlfriend. Now, back in the day, she was kind of semi-hot, but now look at her. Look at her, bug-eyed. Obviously, the drugs and the partying caught up to her, but she decided to flip and cooperate along with her boyfriend. But they were seen out at a lot of the popular restaurants in Chicago, and they were, we'll call them like an acquaintance of the Chicago outfit. They definitely got chased out of Chicago and are never welcome back here. But this is Jill Hollingshead, and there's her husband, Jeff. They are the ones that brought down the PK crew and also gave information on other Chicago outfit cases that are pending. Now we'll switch it up a letter. This guy really wasn't a mob guy, but he definitely received bribes, kickbacks from the Chicago outfit. You got Commander John Burge. This guy is the worst pig in the history of the Chicago Police Department, worse than the mob cops in New York. This lowlife here, what he would do, him and his crew, when there was a big murder that went on or a major tragedy or something heavy that went on, him and his fellow police officers would round up the usual suspects, young black men, and they would torture them into falsifying confessions into murders and crimes they did not commit. They would beat them. They would take the plastic cover off of a typewriter, wrap it around their head, and suffocate them. They would hit them with phone books. They would use electric shock. John Burge was a Vietnam MP, Vietnam soldier, and he would torture the Viet Cong. So some of the torture tactics that he learned in in Vietnam, he would use in the streets. He would put little alligator clips on their ears, on their nose, on their testicles, and then crank this little black box. So these guys were, these kids were 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. Some of them couldn't even read or write. They were brutally tortured. They would do, let's just say 20, 30, 40 years football numbers in prison. And then through DNA and through college research, they realized these black men were innocent. Fast forward, they couldn't charge them for torture because of statute of limitations expired, but he's now a retired Chicago policeman living on his pension in, I think, somewhere in Tampa, Florida. Fucking guy's fishing, drinking beer. He gets a knock on the door one day. It was the FBI. They asked him about some of the tortures back in the 70s and 80s. He lied. As we all know, you cannot lie to the FBI. So they charged him with that. I went to his trial. It was a bench trial. He looked like a big, fat pig, out of shape, just like he does here. Sunburn. The only one there to support him was his brother. Most of the entire courtroom was filled with black people, but you heard from maybe 5, 7 black people who are now men. These are men 60, 70 years old. They all got up there and told a very similar story, how him and his fellow police officers brutally torched and beat him into confessing the crimes they did not commit. This man is one of the worst Chicago officers ever to wear the badge. And some of the guys testified that why they were being beat, why they were being tortured, they smelled alcohol on the cop's breath. When I heard that in court, I was disgusted and I walked out. I could not believe, not only were these kids were being beaten, tortured, but some of these cops were drinking on the job. Johnny Lira, Grand Avenue associate who I actually met, boxer, good friend with Joey Lombardo, he testified that one time he did a score. John Burge grabbed him and hung him out the 10th floor window over there on 11th and State. That was the notorious police headquarters there. And he was asking Johnny, who are you working for? Who's your sponsor? In this particular score, Johnny did by his own. He did it without the Grand Avenue crew's permission, and he was pleading with him with his feet dangling that he did the score on his own. He didn't have a sponsor. But John Burge didn't just torture black and brown people. He actually harassed a lot of the Italians too. But the worst of the worst here, this man is never, ever welcome back in Chicago. He got chased out years ago. And I'm sure he hates that he had to come back to Chicago for court. And last but not least, there's a political guy, Stuart Levine, right? I can't even, this guy got shelved from the city of Chicago during the Governor Blagojevich, Tony Rezko trial. When he decided to flip and cooperate, he left Chicago and hasn't been seen or heard from since. Stuart Levine was part of the Tony Rezko, Governor Blagojevich, and others where they were doing all kinds of shenanigans. This guy testified that on business time, 9 to 5, him and some of his friends would have these wild, gay, almost like a Diddy-like sex party at the famous Purple Hilton Hotel up north. These guys were smoking crack, doing blow, drinking, having sex with prostitutes. I mean, it's one thing for these creeps to do this on the weekends, right? But they were doing it, a Monday, a Tuesday during normal business hours. When he testified to the sex and drugs that were going on by him and his friends, how could you find somebody like this credible? But again, this is a guy a government flips. As soon as he gets handcuffs on him, he doesn't want to do a day or two in jail. He decided to flip and cooperate and testify against Tony Rezko and Governor Blagojevich. I went to all three of their trials. I went to Tony Rezko's trial. Nobody was there except for his wife and kid supporting him. He was the mastermind behind the scam that they had going. Stuart Levine testified against Tony Rezko. And then I went to both Blago trials. The first one, the Blago trial, was a hung jury. The second trial, the Blago trial, he got convicted. The reason he got convicted, the intent was clear on what Blago, Stuart Levine, and Tony Rezko and others were into. One of the charges was the trying to sell Barack Obama's Senate seat, and they were trying to get $2 million from Jesse Jackson Jr. The intent was super clear. It actually never unfolded, but all the federal government has to do is show intent. If they can prove intent, whether you did it or not, you're done. Second mistake Blago made was his big mouth. It's his mouth, his own words, when they bugged his phones. And he's not talking like a gentleman. He's yelling, he's swearing, going on and on and on about his intentions. His brother was charged, but his brother was found not guilty. And Patty, his wife, was almost charged. Blago's problem started when he pissed off his brother-in-law, Mel Reynolds, or Patty's father. Patty's father was friends with all the political guys and all the Chicago outfit guys. They're the ones that got Blago elected. So once Blago gets elected, he turned his back on his own father-in-law and all his father-in-law's powerful friends. And that was the downfall of Governor Blagojevich. Last but not least, he pissed off the judge. The judge, as I said many times in all my experience as a court buff, I'm talking 30 plus trials I went to, the judge controls the entire courtroom. Even if the jury finds a guy not guilty, like for example, they found Jimmy Marcello not guilty of one of the murders at the Family Secrets trial, but the judge believed Nick Calabrese, he believed the government, he overrode that verdict and found that Jimmy Marcello did participate in that murder, which I think was the Strangers in the Night. But that's how much power the judge has. The judge also, he's the one that allows certain evidence in or doesn't allow certain evidence. And that's critical. Some things lawyers want the juries to hear, some things they don't want the juries to hear. If the jury was able to hear other important information on some of these informants, it could have been a different verdict. But these are just some of the men. There's many more I'm forgetting that were chased out of Chicago. If you know others, other informants, other cooperators, please enter in your comments. If you like my Chicago mob trial stories, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Even though it's a little cloudy out there, go out and enjoy yourself. You only live once. Ciao.